African American settlers. How did you get interested in settlers in Nebraska?
I realized that it's a part of history that nobody's really interested in. And we all should be interested in it because there were a lot of people that came before us that were, this was just daily life. I saw black history as just something of great value that nobody really took a great deal of interest in. Well, growing up in Louisiana, I was always interested in farming. And the issue, I think, is owning land. You know, why did we come to Nebraska? If you saw the PBS publication of Bliss, why did they come here? They wanted to own land. So the issue of land and owning things of value just fascinating. One of the reasons why I'm interested in black history, because in those days we were all agriculturalists because everybody lived on a farm.
Why did black settlers come to Nebraska?
You don't think about it now, but how did our parents get here? What brought them here? You know, most people in Omaha came here because of the packing houses or the railroad, and when you look at the census, the early census, we took care of each other, and they came up from Arkansas or Kentucky or Alabama, or for myself, like Louisiana, and the sense of sharing is pretty important.
What was life like for black settlers?
Example. I mean, look at the roof of the house.
Is that dirt?
Yeah, it's a sod. Yes, it's a sod house. Look how they're dressed. It must be kind of close to winter time because it looks like it's kind of woolen clothes. And Solomon Butcher, that's another thing. He was a famous photographer, and I try to find a lot of his photographs. But look at that family, will you? You know, look at, there's a horse. Isn't there a baby carriage somewhere in that? Look at the kid in the baby carriage.
I thought it was a wagon.
Where?
I thought what he was in was a wagon.
Well, it might be a wagon. You're right. It might be more a wagon. I'm trying to give him. You're right. I'm trying to give it. I guess raise it up more, but it probably is a wagon because they probably couldn't afford it. But just look how they're dressed. So.
What was an average meal for black settlers?
In those days, we grew our food. You know, we didn't go to the store. Matter of fact, you know, one of the things I'm concerned about in eating healthy is that the food we eat today, I think those early settlers would be really upset with us because they grew every day. They didn't go to the store.
How did the first black settlers differ from other settlers in Nebraska?
Black settlers that came to Nebraska, the reason we don't have any more is because we got the worst. That's part of the reason why I think we don't have black settlers in the state of Nebraska, because the land is not conducive to growing crops. How are we able to be in positions to own land? How did you know where to go to file your claim? How did you know to get your 160 acres? I mean, you know, you had to be able to read, right? And you probably had some math skills, and you probably had to confide in other people. And you know, who do you really trust to learn all these things from?
What is your favorite story about settlers in Nebraska?
Well, the one that I'm most interested in is in Custer County and Cherry County would be the settlement of DeWitt, Brown Lee settlement. And the one that I remember is the guy, and I can't think of his name, Henry something, and I forgot what county it is, but how people respected him so much that as a cattleman, that they preserved his saddle. And so I just would like to go and see what a black rancher and cowboy saddle looked like.
What were some of the conflicts between settler groups in Nebraska?
In those days, you didn't have the luxury of defining who your neighbors were and all. I mean, you were out there all trying to sustain yourself. I mean, you're out in the middle of nowhere. So I can see why these settlers, and if you read about them, you read about the Nebraska history of Nebraska settlers, you didn't see racial issues per se because they were too busy trying to just to get food to eat to the next day. You know, it's kind of interesting because if you talk to black settlers and you read about them, and you can read about them in here, times were so tough you didn't have time. It seems like you didn't have time to to differentiate between black and white people in these small towns that I lived in, that probably would do more for me than I think a lot of people in my family would do, only because of what I've done for them in terms of buying their grain and marketing their grain. Because in small towns, the three most important things are the grain elevator, the church, and the school. And so when I lived in these small towns, my wife was involved in the church and the school, and I was the grain elevator manager. People got to really like you in a sense.
What were some of the biggest challenges to the black settlers?
The biggest challenge was just day-to-day life, food, eating, like what we're going through now. Think about it. Now you can import some food now, but suppose you had the weather situation like we're going through now in Nebraska with the drought. It isn't necessarily about race so much. It's just about their way of life and how they look at life and how they look at people. You wind up getting into, in my mind, I put everything in terms of race. Because where I grew up, race defined, in Shreveport, Louisiana, race defined where I was born, what hospital I was born in. Race defined, like in that picture I'm showing you, the school I went to. Race defined who my dad's patients were. Being a person of faith, race defined growing up in Louisiana, what Catholic church I went to. Race defined what college I went to.
What were some of the biggest success for black settlers?
Well, in my mind, it's just obvious to me. It's just that they lasted. That there's still that in Nicodemus, Kansas, there's still black farmers out there. How did they? Let's see, 1860. That's 150 years. 100. Our people lasted 150 years. They didn't have anything. The most important thing is they lasted. They made it to the next day.
What are some common misconceptions in black settlers?
Programs and all telling people that they existed and how hard it was. I think that's becoming knowledgeable. The only misconception, I guess I would say, in my mind, is that they didn't get a fair shake. The reason there are no black settlers in Nebraska and we don't own land and that we're not the big cattle ranchers isn't because we didn't have a shot at it. It's because we got the last shot in that period of time. It wasn't because they were poor at it. It's because they didn't have a fair shake. They didn't have the same circumstance. They didn't have the same land. They had, and land is all in those days. It's all about the land, the condition of the land.
Why should we study black settlers in Nebraska?
To me, the most important reason is, when I think about what all our kids are doing now and how life seems so insignificant, it just seems like, man, if we really knew what people went through and how life was, that we would appreciate each other more. But to see how they worked together and how they had a real sense of community, and you look at that, and then you think about now how we shoot and fight and whatever we do, and we don't do all the academic things we do, and it just blows you. The last thing you would do would be to want to take someone's life. It seems like what you want to do is, I need you. I need you to help me and my family. We need to work together. And it just seems like, boy, if there was a way that we could just get this history in front of these kids that are involved in these shootings and gangs and all, some of those kids probably don't even know their own history. Some of those kids that are in Omaha are probably descendants of these people.
Starring Edgar Hicks as himself. Filming, editing, and voices of Kiera, Jordan, Marquise, Jade, and